I saved you. And I'm here to save you again.
Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we're giving you 10 things to know before playing Baldur's Gate 3. The newest RPG from Larian Studios is finally here, and Baldur's Gate has been away for so long. It's about time we see this glorious franchise return. Will you be picking up this massive game at launch? What character class are you starting out with? Let us know down in the comments.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
Story. If you're worried about missing out on whatever stories were in the first Baldur's Gate games, you might be pleased to know that you won't have to worry about playing those to enjoy the new title. Baldur's Gate 3 takes place more than 100 years after the events of Baldur's Gate 2: Shadows of Am, which came out in the year 2000. The main story sees parasitic mind flayers slowly taking over the land of Faerun. You are among their latest victims, and you will have to find a way to cure yourself and rid the world of these monsters, or die trying.
And your mind is gone. The rest, perhaps, is silence.
Rule set.
Each hour that passes, the thing inside us grows. We need to find a healer.
For all you tabletop RPG fans out there, Baldur's Gate 3 does utilize a specific rule set that might help you in building your character and investing in stats. The game will adhere to the 5th edition of the Dungeons & Dragons rule set, which is a version that basically creates a more streamlined RPG experience by simplifying stats like defense and proficiency bonuses. Clearly, this was done to not bog down any new players, and Larian has made additional changes deemed necessary for the translation from tabletop RPG to video game format, specifically to make the combat more enjoyable. Descent into Avernus.
An army was coming, she said. Goblins, drow, and more still. Legions upon legions. The druids of Cloakwood knew the dangers this would bring.
Just to throw this out for lore dorks and Baldur's Gate fans, there is something you can nab for additional story and maybe something to play before or as you're playing Baldur's Gate 3. If you would like to know what happened leading to these events, Descent into Avernus is a tabletop RPG that serves as a prequel to Baldur's Gate 3. Of course, it isn't required reading for you to understand most, if not all, of the video game, but it's there if you want more lore and context.
Bow before the absolute. Bow!
Character classes. Though the selection of character classes includes the expected archetypes, it's worth noting you have a fairly large pool of classes to choose from compared to other RPGs. Baldur's Gate 3 will feature 12 classes to build your character from, those classes being Barbarian, Cleric, Bard, Wizard, Fighter, Druid, Monk, Warlock, Rogue, Ranger, Paladin, and Sorcerer. Needless to say, most players shouldn't have much trouble finding a means to translate their playstyle into the game. That whole early access window.
Consider your predicament. 1 skull, 2 tenants.
Now, some folks might be confused about Baldur's Gate 3 finally releasing when so many folks have seemed to already been playing it. Thing is, that is only partially true. Yes, some folks have already been playing the game, however, those players have only experienced a fraction of the game. During its early access run from October 2020 to August 2023, Baldur's Gate 3 allowed players to experience the first act of the game. So many players logged on that it actually created technical problems, according to Larian Studios. Speaking of Larian, the thing about Larian. Some may be wondering what all the hubbub is about when it comes to Larian Studios. Baldur's Gate fans know that the big studios known for some of the franchise's games include Black Isle Studios, High Voltage Software, Beamdog, and most of all, BioWare. Why Larian when they've never touched the IP before? Well, for those unfamiliar with the studio, Larian has amassed a rather large fanbase with their extensive work on RPGs. Many would point newcomers to their work on the Divinity games, specifically Divinity Original Sin and its sequel, both of which are available to play right now on modern hardware. With the exception of their edutainment games from the late 2000s, Larian has yet to put out a less than decent game.
I'm not ready to call you enemy. What do you say? Shall we be allies?
17,000 endings?
For the land to heal, Ketheric Thorm must die.
I'll tell you a story, true soul.
By now you've probably heard about the wild claims somebody made about Baldur's Gate 3 having over 17,000 endings. One detail some outlets may not be telling you is that these endings are not the kind of endings you or I would expect. You know, vastly different outcomes with different meanings and characters in every scene. Instead, they are variations of endings. But even under that notion, we can't help but feel that somebody is greatly over-exaggerating the number. After all, Skyrim supposedly had 200 endings.
But it wasn't possible. Do you understand?
Your first playthrough.
The infected hear the voice of the Absolute and believe it to be a god.
An interesting quote that's been floating around comes from Baldur's Gate 3's creative lead, Sven Vink. In an interview with Dropped Frames, Vink expressed interest in creating a custom character and recommended that players do the same for their first playthrough. From our point of view, this might be worth taking Vink up on, as custom characters do have their own dialogue options, and the way Baldur's Gate 3 lets you build your character is reportedly very flexible. So don't let the extra work in character creation dissuade you.
How would you feel about helping me kill some evil bastards?
Launch.
I must finish what I started. Death's design will be complete.
Baldur's Gate 3 will be available on PC and PlayStation 5, but players of the latter platform will need to wait a bit longer to play. Whereas PC players can play the game right now by the time you're even watching this video, it will come to PS5 roughly a month later on September 6th, 2023. A version for Xbox Series XS is in development, although Larian has reportedly run into problems making the co-op function properly for that version. And they've also recently said that the game won't be ready for Xbox until probably after 2024. PC players, though, you guys need to make sure you have the specs to properly run the game, as it will require 8GB of RAM minimum, an NVIDIA GTX 970 or RX 480 graphics card with 4GB of VRAM, an Intel i5 4690 or an AMD FX 8350 processor, and roughly 150 gigs of storage space. That's a lot of stuff to consider. And you know what? That's not even the last thing we want to talk about. Before we end the video, we have one last thing to discuss about Baldur's Gate 3.
In simple terms, not just a friend, a legend.
That bear.
Oh, you came. I was concerned you might have had doubts, or that this might have all been too soon.
Look, everybody's been freaking out about this whole bear scene floating around on YouTube and Twitter. All of y'all need to quit obsessing over this bear. Get some class in your souls, go touch some grass, then come back in and watch some Space Jam. You'll be much more cultured after that.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from MojoPlays, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.